Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and we got some more great Kentucky history to bring to you here. And I'm joined with Colton Simpson, the president of the Grant County Historical Society. How you doing, Colton?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good, and thanks for joining us. I know you have a wealth of knowledge here we can talk about. Currently, though, you are also the county judge executive of Grant
Deputy
County.
executive.
Oh, deputy. Whew, my bad.
Yeah, I don't want that responsibility yet.
That's right. That's right. Thanks again for joining us. But Grant County, a lot of history there, right?
There is a lot of history in Grant County, and I am the president of the Historical Society, and it was never something that I sought to be, but I stumbled upon some documents at the clerk's office, and I thought it was very fascinating. So I reached out to them, went to a few meetings, and here I am next year as the president. So I'm super thankful for them, and they're a great group of people and fantastic volunteers that are just wanting to get the history of Grant County out. So a great group of people.
Well, that's awesome. And now, did they have to twist your arm too much, or was
Oh,
you
they
just like,
did.
okay?
Yep, called me 5 times at least. No, it was pretty easy. I was very happy to do it. So
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, me myself, looking around, trying to find people to, come on the show and talk about the counties. Historical societies, you can sometimes find some that are thriving, very good. You can also find some that are kind of on their last leg. But it's very. I'm glad you bring up the volunteers, because those people are really the people who keep it going.
yes.
And the more people volunteered, the better that historical society can thrive and be.
And we have people that staff two historical sites in Grant County, and some are volunteers, some are paid, but the amount of hours they put in is truly remarkable.
Hmm. Well, good. That's a good question I had. So, locations in Grant County. Is there like a museum or places people can go visit, that sort of stuff?
So the two historic sites that are staffed is the William Arnold Log Cabin in Williamstown, and that was the family cabin of William Arnold, which Williamstown was named after the county seat. And then there is the Sherman Tavern in Sherman, Kentucky, that is not incorporated, but that was an old stagecoach tavern built around 1812. And so there's a lot of history on that side as well that we could probably have a whole episode on. But both those sites are great. We do have, we're going through a renovation project at the courthouse, but once that's done, we'll have a room dedicated for the Historical Society.
All right, well, pretty good. Well, let's you mentioned the establishment of the county. What year was it founded?
It was founded in 1820, and it was founded from Pendleton County, pulled from Pendleton County. And prior to that, I'm going to run down this list here. It was once a part of course, Kentucky County before
Yep.
it was founded, but it was part of Fayette County, Woodford County, Scott County in 1792, Campbell County in 1794, Pendleton County in 1798, and then remained Pendleton County until the year 1820, when it was actually a year after a very pivotal bill was passed through the Kentucky General Assembly that expanded the Dry Ridge Road that ran from Covington to Lexington. So all the stagecoaches took advantage of that resource. So great. The people that made up Western Pendleton County decided it was time to form a county. So
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring up Dry Ridge Road, because I don't know about listeners or where they how their geography in their mind goes, but oftentimes when you're on 75 North,
Yep.
the one exit you remember is Dry Ridge. There's a Dry Ridge exit,
Yep.
and maybe people don't notice that it's Grant County or not, but I would say a lot of people probably that's a good familiar point, Dry
Yeah,
Ridge.
it's definitely. I mean, they just redid the water tower, and it says Dry Ridge pretty boldly. But and for people who may not know, that Dry Ridge was a literal ridge, is a literal ridge that is kind of a water divider from Cincinnati to Lexington, and half the water goes into the Licking River, and then on the other side, the water goes into the tributaries of the Kentucky River, kind of starting with Eagle Creek in western Grant County.
All right. Pretty interesting. So Grant County was the 67th county of Kentucky. Now, I find this always interesting, is the county names of Kentucky. And we mentioned this. Who is Grant County named after?
That is a very good subject, and there are very many different resources that give you different names. So I'm curious as to who have you read that Grant County is named after?
All right, so I've been on a mission to making videos about county history or who each county is named after, and we got about 50 or so on the YouTube channel or so. But when it came to Grant County, it was tough, and I had to name it the Grant Brothers,
Yes.
um, because I could not find a definitive which one. Now, the one
Yep.
I found that was the most common was Samuel. I found it multiple times that it was Samuel was the county it was named after, but there was was it Squire and
Yep. There was
John, I believe, was the other ones.
John. Yes, and those are three brothers that there's a historical marker right outside my office, and it says that they were the ones that um, founded Grant's Station in what is now Bourbon County, Kentucky. So I don't know how much affiliation they had with Grant County, but they formed a station a few counties south and got named a county after them. So now I will say that one of the brothers was killed by Indians, actually. And I don't know if you knew this, but the Grant brothers, their mother was a sister to Daniel Boone and Squire Boone.
Oh,
Yeah, so that
well,
kind of all comes full
man,
circle here.
yeah, I did not know that. That's a pretty cool connection.
And I don't know
uh,
I don't know any other interesting things about them other than the fact that their lineage and also their
mhm.
Grant Station in Bourbon County.
Well, just a few other things like the a typical thing, and that leans. Which one did you say was killed by the Native American?
Oh,
Maybe Samuel.
I think it was.
No. Yeah, and the reason I say another reason, like I guess if I was to pick, if I was to say one of the three, Samuel. A
Yep.
lot of Kentucky counties are named after people who were killed in battle and
Yep.
so forth. So that would make sense that he might be the leading front runner, but
Yes.
nowhere that I know of has a definitive answer or that
Can
I
I
can find.
I'll give you a really quick. It was very early comedy in Grant County. They a state representative by the name of William Littell. He's the one that argued that the legislature should pass that bill to create Grant County. And apparently, he was so adamant about it that they said, "Okay, we'll grant you the floor for this vote." So just really early comedy. Didn't who knows? Some people say that that is actually how it got its name, but it's so
Oh, well, that would be unique. That would be
yeah.
a very unique county name. Because there's only like 8 that aren't named after people.
Okay,
Um, but
I don't think we're one.
uh, but also too, you brought up like the affiliation. Not a lot of counties. I think I found maybe 2 counties that the person that it is named after actually lived in the county.
Only two.
Um, and I can't think of. I know I've read it, but I can't
Gotcha.
think of it right off. I want to keep saying Ballard, but he wasn't. Blaine Ballard was in Shelby County
Okay.
as an early frontiersman. But anyway, another time to talk about that. Pretty interesting. Just interesting stuff. It's one of my I guess nerd
Hey,
picks to
yeah,
go
that's a good one.
on. So Let's talk about some of the early frontiersmen, early people, first
Sure.
settlers in
Yeah.
Grant County, which you probably already brought up the ones, but go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, the very first, what we believe to be is the first structure built in Grant County was called Campbell's Station. And it was built by John Campbell, who Campbell County is actually named after. So it was built by John Campbell, and it was we called it the Campbell Stone House is what it was called. And I don't know if John resided there very long, but it was actually used as a trade station with Native Americans and kind of a place to stay halfway between Lexington and Cincinnati if people needed to stay. But there were a group of people in Culpeper, Virginia, and they called it the Concord of, oh, let's see here, I've got it on a note here, the Concord of 1789. And it was a document that said, having agreed to remove ourselves and our families to the western lands, we do covenant with each other and with Almighty God to organize a Baptist church of the Old Faith and Order on the dry ridge between the waters of the Licking and the Kentucky. So
Oh,
before Grant County was even here, other people knew of the dry ridge. So
mhm,
some of the early people to settle here were affiliated with that church. There were others. Uh, I mentioned William Littell. His brother James Littell founded Littell Station in Grant County as well. But a lot of early Grant County actually developed around this old church on the dry ridge. And as I mentioned, Grant County, there was no courthouse near, there was no jail near. So a lot of the disputes in early Grant County actually took place in that church. So if there was a civil dispute, it actually got resolved in the old church on the dry
mm,
ridge. So a lot of early Grant Countians, a lot of whom descendants who come from these people are still around today, and they planted their roots. Um, and to mention, I guess a few. Would you like me to mention a few of these early people?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So the county seat of Grant County is Williamstown, and that was named after William Arnold. And he was a Revolutionary War soldier.
Hmm.
He was originally from New Jersey, moved to Virginia, and pretty much immediately enlisted to fight the British in the Revolutionary War. He fought in the Battle of Yorktown, and according to local legend, he became friends with none other than Marquis de Lafayette.
Oh,
So a local legend, and we'll come back
yeah.
to that in a little bit. He became friends with Lafayette, and promptly after the victory of the Patriots, he was given a land grant in Kentucky. And as early as, I may have it here, as early as 1811, he owned 1,000 acres in what is now Grant County.
Mhm,
He was a justice of the peace in Pendleton County, which was made up Grant County before. But
mhm,
we couldn't talk about the founding of Grant County without talking about William Arnold. So
mhm.
he's
Well,
one of. Go ahead.
that's the very typical story of I guess immigrants from Virginia or North Carolina or wherever they come across into Kentucky and settle up off of war grants and so forth. My ancestors, um, same thing. Fought in the
Yeah.
war, got a grant, and came over. And you get all those surveys and stuff. But typically, those are the first people who rolled in here.
Right.
Maybe excluding Boone and Harrod and Logan and some of those guys who came in right before the war even started. Um,
Right. And there were a lot of people that came in. We've seen in census records that groups of people from say Wilkes County, North Carolina, came in as a group and just settled in what is now northern Kentucky. And you can kind of still trace them. Um, but yeah, they definitely made their mark known early. So,
mhm,
but William Arnold, he actually, upon the founding of Grant County, he donated, I think, 2.5 acres for the public square. And then he said, he kind of, around Williamstown said, if you buy my lots of my farm, I will give you the lumber to build on. So he was a smart businessman.
mhm.
He did
Yeah.
some neat things. But I'd like to even go back prior to the founding of Grant County,
Hmm.
if you'd
Yeah.
like. Um, so, have you heard that the reason there's so many Kentucky counties? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that they wanted each individual person to be able to travel to their county seat on horseback in one day?
I mean, that makes sense. I've never
Well,
really heard that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
maybe another local legend that
Hmm.
is what we've been told. But anyway, it would have been very difficult for Western Pendleton Countyans back then
Yeah.
to get to the county seat of Falmouth in one day. So evidently, people grew tired of having to travel back to Falmouth, um, which is probably a 25-minute car drive from Williamstown. Now, if you're in Western Grant County, it'll take you much longer. Uh,
Yeah.
but that was one of the reasons that they wanted to form a new county. And then, as I mentioned, the uh, the formation of uh, the expansion of the Dry Ridge Road greatly uh, influenced the founding of the county. So,
Hmm.
but a little formational history there.
Well, yeah, and which that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, if you think about the whole forming of Kentucky, the whole reason Kentucky became a state was because people got tired of
Yeah,
traveling to Virginia to deal with that sort of stuff. And it makes a lot of sense because a lot of times, you look at the map now and you're like, why is there so many counties in Kentucky? And you start thinking, well, when these counties were being formed in the 1810, 1820, a lot of Kentucky counties were all formed before 1850. You know,
yeah,
um,
right.
after the Civil War, you're looking at maybe 15, 20 counties,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that are after that. So it makes a lot of sense that travel would be a big
yeah,
issue.
proximity. Uh,
Um,
so when Grant County was founded, they, as I mentioned, William Arnold was a justice of the peace. There were several other founders that were justices of the peace in Pendleton County. But when Grant County was formed, they said, well, you've been in government, you know, let's let you lead. And when they went to go to build their first courthouse, they said, we're going to build our courthouse. I believe it said exactly equal and similar to the one in Falmouth. So they knew what they
mhm.
had in Falmouth, and so they built exactly like they had in Falmouth. It's what they knew. Originally, there was no jail in what is now Grant County, no
Mhm.
courthouse. They built a stray pen, one of the first moves they made, and went from there with no money, no
Uh-huh.
no jail. So it was still pretty barren.
Well, it's funny you bring up the requirements of making the county seat, and I don't know by this time would be a bit different because Kentucky was making these rules, but back whenever Lincoln County or was formed, um, they had to build a courthouse. It had to have a courthouse, a tavern, and a jail in order for it to be a county seat. And so, like Stanford had to build a county seat, or I had to build a jail and a tavern and all that stuff so that it could be the county seat of Lincoln County. Uh,
There were
gotta have.
taverns that sprung up very quickly in Grant County, and William Arnold had one. Uh, and I have to say this because I find it so comical. Is my great 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 grandfather's name was Samuel Simpson, and he was an
Mhm.
early preacher in Grant County and a tavern owner at the same time. So comedic irony of that is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
insane.
Well,
Uh,
it sounded like it's William Arnold, right?
William
Um,
Arnold was William
yeah.
town's namesake.
It sounds like he's got it together. He's making some pretty good moves here.
He did
He-
indeed,
he-
and he was appointed the first county sheriff as well. And let me
wow.
tell you this little tidbit about Williamstown. When they were going to decide what the county seat of Grant County should be, at the first meeting ever, they all decided that it should be called Philadelphia. And
Okay.
so in the first minutes, you'll say that it'll read that the town is to be called Philadelphia. And then 3 meetings later, it was discovered that a Philadelphia was already in Kentucky. Now, have you ever heard of
Oh,
Philadelphia in Kentucky?
well, no, I haven't.
I haven't either. So apparently they got some false information maybe somewhere, or there was a
Mhm.
town that didn't actually get developed. So they said instead of Philadelphia, we're going to call the town Williamstown after William
Okay.
Wallace.
Well, that's pretty cool. That's yeah.
Yeah,
I've not heard of a Philadelphia, Kentucky, and I mean maybe there is, but
yeah. Well, according to some local historians, there was no Philadelphia ever found.
uh,
But apparently the original justices had, they
so,
heard a rumor.
so yeah,
So,
somebody planted a bug. It's like, hey guys, I
yeah,
already heard there's a Philadelphia.
I already,
I'm
it's
gonna
really
say it was William. It was William Arnold. It was that's,
that was the joke I was going to make, but not to defend William Arnold by any means. But yeah, we joked like, I heard there was already Philadelphia. I've got an idea. So
yeah. Yeah.
so
Another question that I always find interesting: stations. How many? Because this is still 1820. I mean, you're getting kind of out of the frontier time, but still, before Grant County was formed, how many stations do you think was in the area? Because stations were very key to that early
yeah.
settlement, development, and all that stuff.
So really, the only ones that I had heard of was was the one at Campbell's Blockhouse, that built
Hmm.
by John Campbell, Littell's Station in southern Grant County. But then there was just a few other taverns that existed on the Dry Ridge Road. Like I said, Samuel Simpson had a tavern. There was a few other ones that popped up, but a lot of that information would actually be available in the Pendleton County record books
Yeah.
because we wouldn't have them in Grant County, so we'd have to go
Hmm.
back. And we're actually fortunate to have there's a student a graduate student at NKU right now that's doing some research from Pendleton County and looking up the Sherman Tavern. But I will say that the Sherman Tavern was also a very integral part in early Grant County because people could stay there, but also the stagecoaches running through would stay there as well. So there wasn't a whole lot before 1820 because the county seat was in Falmouth. So those
Gotcha.
early ones, the Sherman Tavern, of course, was big, and I'd be happy to send you pictures of that,
Yeah.
or at a later time. But yeah,
Yeah.
those three um, were were it pretty much, and then
Hmm.
but actually we do know that Campbell's Block House was even torn down pretty early in county history too. So
Oh, yeah. This is just a history question. How many historical sites do you have in Grant County that are still like up and visitable? I guess if that's the
yeah,
word.
so we have the William Arnold Cabin.
Hmm.
Uh, we have the Sherman Tavern, of course. Um, I mean, the courthouse is a historic. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
historic site, any way you want to square it. Um, but there was a lot of old houses that popped up in Williamstown.
yeah.
A lot of them are gone. There was a couple of houses built prior to the Civil War. Um, One of them was built by the first ever Grant County clerk, and his name was Hubbard B. Smith, and it was right here on US 25. And when he was appointed the first clerk of the county, it said in parentheses, only during good behavior. So he's been an interesting guy too. But some of these are private residences that
Yeah.
people can actually visit. So
Mhm.
and like I said, Grant County was the 67th county formed, and there wasn't a whole lot here before 1820. So a lot of these older properties just weren't here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of actually sets Grant County a bit unique, as far as development and those sorts of things, or at least the counties we've covered before.
yeah,
Because it almost as if once the county was established, that's what made the area develop and grow.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh,
And for a lot of Grant County's history, it was a halfway point.
mhm.
There was a hotel and inn in Williamstown, and it was called the Halfway House. Because there was the buses would once you got to Williamstown, you were halfway between Cincinnati and Lexington. So it kind of developed into this place where you could stay halfway between. So there wasn't it wasn't a destination; it was a halfway point. You
Yeah.
know, so coming out of that now, it's trying to make Williamstown a destination. We can kind of get into that a little later if you want,
Yeah. Oh,
but
definitely.
that was kind of the feeling of Grant County was it was a halfway point. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I would even say, well, we'll get into that. I was going to say, even today, people stop there.
yeah,
Um, so once the county's established, what are some other early names? I guess besides William
sure.
and some of those other people that were first
So
settling there.
an early minister in Grant County that kind of he left us a lot of history. His name was Elder William Conrad.
Hmm.
He was born in early Grant County history. He was an early. He actually preached at the old church on the Dry Ridge that we mentioned earlier, and several different other churches. Um, he wrote an autobiography that greatly detailed early county history, um, and even up until the Civil War, when he was an older gentleman. Um, he actually was imprisoned in the second Grant County courthouse because they suspected him to be um, they suspected him of being a Southern sympathizer. But several years prior to that, he was a wealthy farmer, and several years prior to that, he actually donated money to build the second courthouse. So he was actually imprisoned in the same courthouse that he donated the funds to build. So
Oh,
the irony of that situation as well. But um, he was a fascinating early. He had a lot of different enterprises and a lot of different things. So he's a great example of one. Um, some of the early uh, preachers, of course, were very well known just because their names were left in records. You know,
yeah,
if you weren't a part of a church or a part of a government, your name was lost. You know,
yeah,
unless you're in the census. But just census details, you don't get a story. But the
yeah,
names of people that were in government or in churches, that was preserved. Um, so that was you know some of the early people, and I'll go back to the church since we're talking about it. um, there were there's at least three different churches in Grant County that claim to be the offshoot of the old Baptist.
well,
We're actually the ones that came out of that. So
uh-huh.
but a lot of early Grant County history was building a community, building the villages, building the towns.
Hmm.
It's because they had to. It
Yeah,
was just part of their what they had to do in order to create a successful county.
yeah. So on record, what is the oldest church in Grant County?
It's the old Baptist church. Now, actually, the Dry Ridge Baptist Church, which sounds similar to the old church on the Dry Ridge, but they had a
Hmm.
disagreement in theological differences, and they split from the old church, and they are still in existence today. And they were formed in I think it was around 1817 or 1818.
Wow.
So you
Uh,
know,
that's old. Yeah.
no, it definitely was, and they moved to what we now know as the city of Dry Ridge. Um,
Hmm.
the other group, including Elder William Conrad, upon the formation of Grant County, they actually decided that they were going to move to the county seat. So they moved to Williamstown, built a church. You're not familiar with it, I don't think, but it sat at the entrance to the Williamstown Cemetery, and there's a
Okay.
monument today. So, but they formed it and said we are the continuation of the old church on the Dry Ridge. But so
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
you know,
that's some good little history.
church politics, you know.
Yeah. 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 That's the way. Yeah. Church politics, man.
Yeah,
It can it can get rough. Um, So, aside from that, what are the because I'm familiar with Dry Ridge. You got Williamstown. What are the other say big cities? Not well.
sure.
Let me phrase it. Big towns or
Yeah.
towns that people would see on a map. I guess.
Yeah. So in Grant County, you have the county seat of Williamstown. You have Dry Ridge. Today you have the city of Crittenden, which is our northernmost city, right on the edge of Boone County, actually. And then at the southern end of the county, you have Corinth. And those four cities, those four towns, all have exits off of US 25.
Mhm.
Uh, but that doesn't mean that they were always, the biggest cities in Grant County. A lot of them were. Williamstown and Dry Ridge were historically the largest cities. Crittenden is now actually the most populous city in Grant County. Um, but there were little communities, Heakin, Holbrook,
Mhm.
Mount Zion, Kiefer. I read in a newspaper recently that in 1899, a little city called Hanks said, "Hanks still exists in Grant County. Come visit us and visit our store." So there was all these little communities that formed together, and then of course, as time went on, those old corner stores closed down.
Yeah.
But just leaving the names. But Sherman, like I mentioned, the Sherman Tavern, that was its own community that actually built around the tavern. The tavern was a centerpiece to it, and different stores would provide goods to travelers. And but there were many different little communities, but those four were the main
Main
ones.
ones. Now, Crittenden is named after John Crittenden, correct?
Crittenden, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
And which? Go ahead.
No, no, no. I was about to. I don't know. Corinth was named after the city across the sea. Um,
Mhm.
and Dry
Yeah.
Ridge, of course, was the only city that had its name from that original Dry Ridge, the
Hmm.
geographical
Hmm.
one. So.
Now, can you get to that spot, the Dry Ridge spot? Is it, I mean, is there like a way to get to the or no?
Well, so the Dry Ridge is just the term used for that
For that
long
ridge.
geographical area that runs between Cincinnati and Lexington. And so even
Okay.
even up to Covington would be considered used to be
Gotcha.
considered part of that old Dry
Hmm.
Ridge. So like in 1789, when this church decided that they were going to remove themselves to the Dry Ridge, they didn't know exactly where to go, right?
Yeah.
Uh, they just said, somewhere between Cincinnati and Lexington, and they just ended up settling there at Campbell Station, that old
Hmm.
blockhouse that protected them from Native Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is still the only city that bears the name of that Dry Ridge.
Hmm. Sounds good. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we're going to pause right here with Colton Simpson from the Grant County Historical Society and pick up again next week to continue our discussion. We want to thank Colton for being on, and thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you, the viewers, the listeners. We want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.